Thank you for taking the time to join us today as we take a look at Web Apps Accelerator for Dynamics SL. We'll talk about the product itself, the people behind the product, and then we do a quick demo. Web Apps Accelerator, or WAA as the name suggests, is a highly modified version of SL Web Apps, originally developed by Microsoft to provide a web front end to SL for project management, time entry, expense entry, and approvals. It's an okay product, except it tends to be slow and the interface is pretty bland. WAA takes the SL Web Apps and makes it much faster, more user-friendly, and do much more. WAA is a subscription-based product, so you may pay for the product either monthly, quarterly, or annually. We also offer limited-time free trials for qualified sites. Some of us in the ERP group have been working with Microsoft Dynamics SL, formerly known as Solomon, since 1986. So we've been around for quite a while and are very experienced in both consulting on the product and developing it, which sets us apart from the pure development shops that may not know business processes or client needs very well. Our clients span a wide variety of industries. Besides project-oriented companies, we also work with companies in manufacturing, distribution, and service industries. If you're interested in the product, please go ahead and reach out to us at the contact information below. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the product itself. This is the login screen for WAA. And on this screen, I want to talk about a couple of new features we added to the system. The first is the support for two-factor authentication to enhance security to the whole entire system. This is an optional feature that you can set up to use either Duo or email to deliver the secondary code to the user to log in addition to their password. In the case of Duo, the user will get the code via their cell phone, and in the case of email, they will get the code via the email address as defined in the project employee record. The other new feature that we added is the support for mapping the same user, same SL user, or same login here to multiple employees in different companies. So that's a great thing for folks with multiple companies in SL. Okay, once we log in, you see the new interface, primary interface for WAA. On the very top, we have a menu that persists throughout WAA. So that makes it easy for you to jump from one task to the other task. So if you're in the middle of time card entry, you want to switch over the expense, you can easily go up to the menu and switch over the expense entry. The other thing you notice is all these exclamation marks. These are the areas that require attention. So you know at a first glance that you have something under the project menu that you need to attend to. And under that, we have something under the approvals function. So there's a couple of approvals that you need to attend to. So those are the things that you need to watch out for. And if you take care of these things, then those exclamation marks will go away. On the jump back to the Jumbotron, which is what we call this main area of the screen, you see the messages, approvals, and unapprovals. Again, those would only appear if you have something under those areas. So messages would only show up, the button only show up if you have communicated messages that you haven't dismissed or delete. Okay, so those communicated messages would be something like time cards waiting for approval, projects activated, or any kind of allocated messages and that kind of sense. Approvals and line approvals, we will talk about those a little bit later. But again, they only appear if you have something to approve. Same thing with time cards and expenses down here. The time card and expense reports that are showing here for November 4th and May 31st, they show up because they are the oldest in-process documents I have for those types of documents. I'm going to go ahead and click on this one to get to the time card and talk about time cards. I just loaded this November 4th time card that has 48 lines, just like that. It took about a couple of seconds, and I can see all 48 lines at the same time by scrolling down and up. This would have been impossible to do in standard web apps. It would have taken at least a minute or two to load this time card, and you can only see like 12 lines at a time. So that's one big improvement in WAA over the standard web apps product, is the overall performance and snappiness. We've added row numbers to make it easier for you to identify which row you're on. The column headings, we have made it sortable, so now you can click on project and task and have it sorted by project and task. If you click it again, it will sort in descending order. Same thing is true with all the other column headings too. We added the totals, hourly totals for every day onto the column heading. And you can sort by that. In this case, Monday, I work 13 hours. If I click on that, it will show me the hours in a descending order as well. So it tells me which project I spend most of the 13 hours on. The same thing is true with any other column here. We added a button for you to easily remove the row, edit a row, and copy the row. In terms of adding a new row, you can either do it manually by adding a new row here or clicking on the drop-down rows drop-down on top, and which allows you to add a new row manually or add a new row that's assigned to you for this time period. So if I do that, it basically shows me the projects and the tasks that I've been assigned to work on for this time period. And that's an optional feature in SL, which is a resource management feature. So in this case, let's say I'm going to work on this project right here, and that's all I need to do is click on it, and then the line is added for me. I don't need to do anything more about that. But if I prefer to add a new line manually, I can click on this button here, or again go to the rows drop down and do that. And when I do that, then I can add the project that I want to work on manually. One thing I want to point out is that we've added support for the F3 key, the function 3 key that can be used for lookup. So for those people who are familiar with SL, this is the key in SL as well to do lookups. And if you like to do that in web apps, you can do that now as well. So once I add a new line, I can easily add hours. So let's say on Saturday, I work pretty hard as well. I put a couple hours here. And then if I want to designate some of these hours as overtime, so let's say for this 2 hours that I added on Saturday, it's all overtime because it's Saturday. I can then click on the overtime button on top and say this 2 hours are overtime. And when I save that, it tells me that the 2 hours, out of the 2 hours that I put in there, 2 hours are overtime. So that means everything is overtime in this case. I can also add a daily invoice comment to this particular day by clicking on the comments button on top. And this comment then applies to the project and task and this particular day. So this is used for billing. So once I save that, it would give me an indicator on the upper right-hand corner that I have a comment. I have a pink triangle right here. The day view is a button for you to show just one column instead of all the 7 days right here. And this could be handy in a case where you have using a smaller device, maybe like an iPad. If you're looking at it, portrait mode, you don't want to see all 7 days at a time. You can easily just narrow it down to 1 day. So if I want to look at Monday here, I can then just do that, and it will show me only the hours for Monday. I can exit the view very easily, just like that. Project filter is a way for me to analyze the time card very easily by looking at just the hours for a given project. So in this case, I put in CO123 and hit enter. It would then show me only the hours for projects that contains the CO123. So I got CO123 000, 001, and 002. And the totals on top then reflect the totals for CO123 projects as well. I can clear the filter just as easily by clicking on the X right here. This button gives me a way to visualize the hours. So in this case, I can quickly see which projects I spend most time on in this particular week. If I prefer a pie chart, I can do that. A donut chart, I can do that. I can also change the date range to look at a wider date range than just this week. On the right-hand side, I have this button to group the hours by project. So when I click on group by project, it will then group all the hours by project and shows me how many lines I have for a given project and how many hours I put in total. If I want to see the detail, all I need to do is click on that, and it shows me the details for that. And if I want to expand all so I can see the details for every project below their totals, I can easily do that by clicking on expand all. The system remembers your view preference automatically here. So if you leave it like this and get out of the time card and come back in, it would remember this view and show you the data in this view every time you come back here. Of course, you can easily remove that by removing a grouping. If you also add a project at this point in time, let's say you add a line for CO123001, that line will automatically be added to the grouping as well. Multi-delete row mode. This is the feature for you to delete multiple rows at the same time. I have a big time card, and there's a lot of rows that I don't have any hours. So I want to clear that. I can easily turn this on, and then I'll go down here and say I don't want to have this row in here anymore. There's too many things going on. So I can select all those rows and then click on this button on the right to delete selected rows, just like that. Show weekends is pretty straightforward. If I say yes to show weekends, then it will show all the weekends. If I say no to show weekends, it will not show weekends. By the way, we have an optional add-on to support 980 as well. And 980 is, for those clients who are familiar with that, is basically an alternative work week that where the company works every other Friday instead of every single Friday. So in that case, typically you'll need 8 columns because the cutoff is Friday noon. So you got Friday PM, Friday AM hours. We have an optional add-on to support that configuration as well. One last feature I want to talk about before we finish the topic of time card entry is custom validations that are available with WAA. In this example, I've entered 25 hours on Monday, which is, humanly impossible unless you're a lawyer. So when I try to save a time card, I get a validation error. And this is a custom validation provided by WAA in the form of a store procedure, which means it can be modified by your SL reseller or SQL programmer to add additional validations that you may need, such as checking for overtime rules and maybe labor class entry or sub-account entry and whatever else that you may want. Okay, now that we're done with time card entry, let's move on to expense entry. Adding a new expense report to WAA is as simple as putting in a description in the header, set the date of the report, and then save. I can add a new line by clicking on this button up here or this button down below. So I can do that and then put in my date of my report. Oops. Okay, so I'm getting this validation that says I can't enter expenses that are older than 30 days, which is a customizable validation that we put into the system that you can set to any number of days. So in this case, yes, I clearly put in the wrong date, so I'm going to go back and fix my date there. It's actually the 27th when I make the trip. And this is a mileage, so I'm going to put in my mileage expense type, pick my project, pick my task, and then I fill in my miles. Notice the rate of 65.5 cents. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Then I'm going to add a new line here, and this time is my return trip. So I'm going to go ahead and use the calendar picker this time and pick the date. I say I come back on the 3rd, and that's again a miles. Again, not 100 miles to the same project there. And then notice this time automatically it picks up a 67-cent miles. That's the per mile. That's basically the rate for that IRS set for 2024. So this is one of the new features we added to expense reporting that allows you to set a effective date for different mileage rates using the SL code file. Another new feature that we added is the support for GSA expenses. GSA is used by government contracts to enforce per diem rate for hotels and meals. So in this case, I went to Seattle, so I'm going to go and put in my GSA zip code here, which is Seattle zip code. And then I can add a new line for GSA expenses. So December 27th, so now I arrive there. I'm going to pick my expense type of GSA lodging. Now, this is an expense type that we set up for our demo purposes. We call it GSAL, but you can call it anything else. As long as it's flagged with GSA, it will work. So when I pick that type, it will ask me, the arrival date, the number of nights, and the nightly room rate. Okay, so if I put in $250 a night with $50 of tax, and I'll pick my receipt. So this is my receipt. Now, if you enter this in the mobile phone, you would have the option of picking an existing receipt or taking a picture of the receipt. And when I hit create, it creates 4 lines for me. Okay, 2 sets for the 2 dates that were involved, 27th and 28th. for each of the 2 days, I have a line for GSA L for the lodging line, another line that's UN, which is unbillable. You can see the amounts are already broken down for me. So the system automatically talks to GSA in real time using their web service and retrieves the nightly rate, allowable rate for Seattle for that date range. And then it splits up my expenses into allowable and not allowable. So the 211.2 is allowable, can be billed to GSA without them rejecting your billing. So that's going to be allowed, and the rest wouldn't be allowed. So we're not going to make it billable. It's not going to be billed to the project. That's the GSA functionality. It's entirely optional add-on, but it's a nice feature that we added. So I'm going to go ahead and save the expense report because I'm done for it, and I'm going to go ahead and complete the expense report. And just like time cards, we have a custom validation that you can have your SL reseller program for you. It's a store procedure that checks for the data that's been entered to make sure that it meets the requirements of your business. In this example, we have programmed in a rule that requires a receipt on every single line. So it's rejecting my attempt to complete the expense report because I have some lines that are missing a receipt. Okay, so I'm going to say okay. I'm going to fix the problem, and when I click on the attach button again, in this case I'm on a computer, so it's going to browse to my file system, allowing me to pick a receipt. But again, if you're on a mobile phone, mobile device that has a camera, it will let you take the picture on the fly as well. I'm going to do that on the first line. I'm going to do that on the second line as well. And then now I should be able to complete the expense report. Let's take a look at line item approvals in WAA. We have added the ability to do an executive approval for an employee that's designated as a project executive. Such an employee will be able to approve all the line items in the entire company. They can select it by any of these following criteria. So if they select company, then they will be able to see all the lines for the company that needs to be approved, and they will be able to approve them. If they go back to my projects, then they will only be able to see the lines where they are on the projects that they are assigned as PM to. And that will be the default setting for a non-executive user. So it shows me, in this case, I got 3 expense lines to approve. And I can look at additional details behind these lines by clicking on this binocular. So in this case, in the second line, I want to see more about it. For example, maybe I want to see the receipt. I click on that, and then it shows me the lines related to that expense. And this is a GSA one, so all of them have the same receipt. So I go ahead and click on any one of these lines here, and I can see the receipt right there. Okay, so that will be how you can look at the details behind the lines. And I go back to the main page. I can also click on the document link right here to see the actual expense report as was entered. So this will show me the lines that are on the projects that I may not be the PM on. So in this case, it was the CO12300. That's my project. CO12302 is not my project. So it's, those lines are not showing on my line item approvals, but I can still see them here, so I can see the context for that expense report. And when I'm done, I can simply just approve and reject. If I reject something, I must enter a reason for the rejection. Okay, and when I leave the field, I can then save. And those 2 lines are gone for my line item approvals. The same kind of functionality works in the document approval capability area as well. So document approval, I would have the ability to approve the entire project expense report or time cards or budget revision. Okay. In the case of time card and expense reports, all the lines in the expense report or time card must be approved by the PMs first before I can approve the document itself. And again, just like the line item approvals, I can easily look at the document as it was entered. So in this case, this is my expense entry that I need to review and approve. So I bring it up and take a look at it to make sure everything is okay. I can look at the receipts as well. So when I'm ready to approve, I simply just approve it, reject and approve whatever I want to do, and I can save it. Notice that there is also a link here if you're looking for time cards. In this case, I didn't see any time cards approved. And so I'm wondering where everybody's time card is, so I can look at the time card status right here. And this shows me the status of the time card for this week ending date. These people are missing their time cards, for example, so I can bug them. I can actually send them a message right here to tell them to complete the time cards. Besides improvements to time and expense entry and approval, we have done a couple of things to the system to make it easier to use. One of them is Quick Query. In Quick Query, we have improved the viewing experience by adding a record ID to every single row, as well as highlight as you're clicking around so you can easily see which line you're looking at, and also adding 1,000 separated to the amount, just again make it easier to use. Another thing we've added to WAA is ability to see who is online. So if I go to options about, I can easily see who is currently in the system, which is kind of handy for me to manage the system. Okay, so that concludes our short video on WAA. If you're interested in the product, please again reach out to us via the contact information here.